So, good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. My name is Vyshlinsky. I am the director of the Center for Economic Strategy, and we're starting our event today. The event is dedicated to the topic, Can the Ukrainian economy grow in 2023, with a forecast of governmental and non-governmental experts. Those 2 months already that we live in 2023, then we have now received the first results of how the economy worked in 2022, and we have even seen it were a little bit better than we've wanted it, than we forecasted it to be. But the next question that is important for everyone who follows Ukrainian economy is what's going to happen with Ukrainian economy in year 2023. It's quite clear that in year 2022, we have gone through this year without the big financial downfall, economical downfall, but it's quite clear still that the overall vision of how the economy will develop further on is important. It's important for both Ukrainian businesses, for our international partners who have to now have a better understanding what would be the scale of the assistance they can provide to Ukrainian economy. It is also important for the further on development of the long-term partnership program from the International Monetary Fund. So today we have decided to invite the main governmental think tanks and the main governmental forecasters, which is the Ministry of Economy and the National Bank of Ukraine. We wanted to discuss their governmental forecasts and our private non-governmental forecasts that are going to be presented by Maria Repko, my colleague. And right now, I just wanted to once again thank our partner from the United Kingdom, because one of our today's event is one of the activities under the project Capacity Support for the Evidence-Based Public Finance Management, which is supported by the British Embassy in Kyiv. And we are one of the implementers of this project. And right now, I would like to pass the floor to the Minister of Finance of Ukraine, Serhiy Marchenko, for our introductory part. He is actually one of the main representatives of Ukrainian government. He is one of the representatives of the main forecasts and planning for Ukraine's economy in 2023 and in one of the key stakeholders in the negotiation process. Serhiy, the floor is yours. Hello, thank you very much, Hlib. I'm pleased to welcome you, ladies and gentlemen. I do believe that it's a very important event for all of us today. We have to understand what is the situation with the economy right now, what are the events and measures, economical and fiscal and monetary, we can use to change the current existing state of things and to improve it, because basically for the whole year long, we have been in quite a volatile environment. It was changing all the time. It was really hard to forecast anything. So all of the forecasts that we've had at the very beginning of the full-scale war, they didn't come true because we have forecasted a really big backdrop of the GDP. Fortunately, economy didn't fall that high, that much. Well, 30% is still a lot. In 2023, we have a lot of uncertainty as well. How will the economy restore? Whether there will be enough capacities for the businesses to be adapted to the current realities? What would be the expectations from the businesses for the opportunity of additional reinvestment or additional investment into Ukrainian state? There's a lot of questions that are very challenging. There is the questions of the logistics corridors as well. There's a lot of uncertainty with that. The main and important basic question is the war itself. How long will it take? It's really hard for us to forecast that and evaluate that, but this is the main uncertainty that we have to be counting on. But still, the businesses have shown us opportunities to adapt. 90% of businesses, according to the surveys, have already restored their activities fully or partly. We have some governmental programs as well that give the opportunity for the businesses to restore their positions, the programs for the support of the businesses, the 579 programs. For example, in year 2023, we hope to deliver additional 16 billion hryvnias for that program. There is a separate question for the granting support that can be provided for the businesses. In the same time, we do understand that the war that we have conducted, the that this work is also influencing the macroeconomic stability. When we're speaking about engaging the official grants and loans to support the budget deficiency, and last year there's level of debt was $31 billion US dollars. So this year, the additional external sources, that would be 38 billion US dollars for supporting budget deficiencies. We have a clear understanding more or less who's going to be providing this assistance to budget. We do not fully have the all 38 billion covered, but more or less we understand that the situation is under control. The situation is more or less stable, and we know that the money can be delivered with in certain terms and limits, and that helps us to hope for the implementations of the budget in the needed terms as well. I just wanted also to emphasize that there's a lot that will depend on all of the costs that we will use for the military campaign, and you all know that we're not using the money of the international grants and loans for the military campaign. So that is why we're currently actively working for the income part of the budget and for searching for additional money in the internal market together with the support with the National Bank of Ukraine. Also wanted to say that currently we are in the very active negotiation stage of negotiations with the International Monetary Fund. We're hoping for the new program for Ukraine, and we're doing everything in our power to have a next collaboration program that is going to be very important on creating and reassuring our partners so that we will be able to create a certain policies and stability and situation in Ukraine. This negotiation process is an important track for all of us, and in understanding this, we need to have a very good macro forecast. We need to have an understanding of how the economy is going to be developing for year 2023, 24, and 25. We need to understand if we will be able to provide the economical growth this year already, because we will need to prove to our international partners that we will have the reasons to speak about the restoration of Ukrainian economy, and that we will have to prove them that there has to be some measures that will give us the opportunity to restore the economy. I think I will stop with that. I really would like to listen more pros and cons of all of those approaches when we're talking about the economical restoring and economical growth this year. So thank you very much for the invitation. Thank you, Serhiy. Except for this very scientific forecast that are going to be presented today by Maria Repko, there is a very interesting tool has been introduced on the Telegram channel by the Member of Parliament, Yaroslav Żelezniak. Also, on a weekly basis, he measures the mood of his subscribers, and I know that might be a lot of people who are here present today as well, and it's very interesting to know, to follow what is the difference between the pessimistic, optimistic, and neutral sentiment. And so Masha is going to present you with this forecast as well. We have conducted it with our friends and colleagues from the private, both profitable and non-profit organizations that present Ukrainian economics, just to find the answer to the questions what it is that the professional forecasters go with. So whether the Ukrainian economy is going to grow, or whether the economy is going to fall, or whether we will preserve the situation as we've had in 2022. So I would like to pass the floor to the Deputy Director of the Center for Economic Strategy, Maria Repko. So Maria, please, I would like to ask you to start your presentation about what has been forecasted by our colleague. You know, we're not the forecasters ourselves, so we have a very good position here because we can just basically barely present what our colleagues have forecasted. Hi everyone. Good afternoon, everyone. I hope that you can hear me well, and thank you very much for this intro. Yes, for sure, I'm going to share my presentation right now, because our presentation is going to be very interesting for both Ukrainians and for our international colleagues, because you're going to listen to the perspectives of the growth of Ukrainian economy and additional moments where we will need some economical assistance for for the next year. So what we have asked our colleagues to do, we have asked the 7 of our colleagues who, in my point of view, have been very heroic in forecasting the macro indicators, and they have done the very good job. And we have now engaged the leaders of the think tanks teams that are the very good teams, and those we have invited: the Concord Capital, Dragon Capital, ICA, Morgan Stanley, Oxford Economics, Sense Bank, and the team of the Institute for Economic Research and Policy Consulting. Together with German economic team, we have invited all of them and engaged all of them to provide the analysis. We have the 7 teams. We have provided their forecast for these basic indicators, and we will then show you what they have forecasted and what can we sum up. So the forecasts on growth of the real GDP. Well, basically, you can see that the differences are very, very big, from 4.6, from minus 4.6 up to plus 5.5. So we haven't provided any specific numbers. So we have just asked the people to think of what they have forecasted in the forecasts of their companies. The average would be minus 0.1%. So you can see that there is a certain uncertainty in this, but there are both opportunities for further growth and opportunities for the downfall. Both are possible. Speaking about the nominal GDP, so we understand that there's more or less $10 billion. So we're talking starting from $152 billion up to 161, and that will be the overall nominal GDP. The CPI from 17 up to 21, the average for the year, and the prices will grow. If we will just consider from December to December, then the valuation is slightly different, and you can see that it will be starting from 14.5% up to 18.7% for this year. So what we see is that basically we have this both the nominal GDP figures and the overall prices index. They don't have a very big differences between them. There is more or less the same approach for the average rate, starting from 36.6 hryvnias that was now still fixed by the National Bank of Ukraine, up to the most negative forecast, which is on the point of 39.5. This negative forecast is based on the idea that by the end of the year, and the analysts would believe that the National Bank either can provide a second operation of increasing the fixed rate, either there might be the liberalization of the market and the rate will be given to the market levels. The year-end average evaluation would be 41.3 hryvnias per $1. The level of that evaluation is not going to be very significant in this case. What is interested here then, the reserves of the National Bank of Ukraine that are now on the point of $29.9 billion in the average evaluation will not change almost. So this international support and the incomes of the state will be enough to minimize the, let's say this way, to minimize the impact of the cash outflow. The worst forecast that we have seen was $26 billion, the best was 33. The most interesting page in this forecast for me, that's the additional budget deficits and the needs for the additional assistance. The budget deficit, based on other thoughts of our analytics, they believe that it started from 33 up to $46 billion this year. The funding need, they will once again increase based on the amount of the money that will be provided to the budget. There's going to be the coverage provided for both the internal and with both domestic and the foreign debt. Unfortunately, we can see that the expected foreign aid that we expect from our international partners, if we will see the average figures, that is going to barely cover the amount of the budget deficiency, that it's not enough to fully cover the whole need for funding. So this difference is about $11 billion. So there will be the need to cover this difference as well, is either through the increase of this financial support compared to expected, or with the help of some other sources. The expectations for our economists, the one that we have talked to, that the average indicator of the debt towards the GDP is going to be on the level of 93% this year. That's very painful. That's something that we haven't experienced for many years in Ukraine, but yes, during the war, in the times of war, this kind of situation is really hard to avoid. We do believe that it would be very good if this kind of a gap will be able to cover the gap with the support of the international grants that will help us to a little bit take down the debt level, and if we will have a little bit of a growth in at least 18 to 20%. And about the additional assumptions that they would do. So we've asked what kind of assumptions they were basing their forecasts on. So most of our colleagues, they do assume that the grain corridor is going to be working for the next year. Actually, the 100% of our experts have said that the grain corridor is going to be working. There were just like different slight comments. For the war assumptions, like not like 50 per 50, but it's like 4% to what 3 people will do. They thought and assumed that the war is going to go through year 2023 and maybe will end only next year. And 2 of our experts have said that the hot stage might end in 2023, so they have included that in their forecast as well. So in the mid 2023 or the third quarter in 2023. And they expect the mitigations on possibly the end of the hot stage of the war and maybe the turnout to the peaceful regulations process further on. And I want to conclude my presentation with a very harsh note for me. So this is the photo that I have seen just a couple of days ago. It has been published in the media. That's Ukrainian city of Marchenko. There's something that has happened with it, and I have been in Dresden, and I know what has happened to Dresden during the World War II. But this photo is much worse, and this is not the only city that has been fully destroyed. There's many cities like that. Right now, the Ukrainian army is protecting the Ukrainian cities, and I would like to ask you, there is the QR code for the Leleka Foundation, and the Leleka Foundation is the foundation that supports the tactic medical aid for our military men. If you would like to donate, so please consider this foundation for your donation. It will really help to save people's life. Thank you very much for your attention, and I will stop my presentation now. Yes, thank you very much, Maria. Thank you very much. And speaking about the donations, I would really like to ask you to send the link to the general chat because, well, the QR code wasn't visible because of the Zoom panel. So please let us know in the chat. Yes, all of the QR codes there will be in our presentation, and you will be able to download our presentation from the website. And I'm going to once again copy the link into the chat, so you can see there is a chat. There is a link into our chat. Thank you very much, Maria. And as always, you can post your questions in the Q&A section, and our speakers will try to answer in writing throughout our today's events, or we will try to pose all of the possible questions together with Maria as the moderators of our today's events. Now I would like to pass the floor to Serhiy Nikolaychuk, who is the Deputy Head of National Bank of Ukraine, who is responsible for the monetary policy and the economic analysis, who is also, we have switched their positions a little bit because the Ministry of the Economy and Oleksiy Sobolev is going to join us slightly later, so we have changed the order a little bit, and Oleksiy is going to present us with the governmental forecast, but we will start with a forecast that is an official forecast, but not a governmental forecast. So this is the forecast from an official governmental institution, but as this is a self-standing substanding forecast, and we know that everyone pay additional attention to the National Bank's forecast because of the very high quality of this forecast. So, Serhiy, the floor is yours. I would like to ask you, so how do you foresee the development of Ukrainian economy this year? I know that you have your own forecast schedule. I know that you have your own schedule for preparing these forecasts, and I know that you're going to be mostly talking about what has been already published, but maybe there have been certain changes in the visions of how you can change this forecast and how this forecast may be changed for the months to come. Yes, thank you, Hlib. I do not want to pay additional attention to our January forecast because I do believe that all of the people have been aware of this forecast already, and I just wanted to concentrate on the forecast that we've had before. And I just wanted to share my vision of how the economy has evolved at the beginning of this year and how it corresponds to our forecast that we've had in January. So what I wanted to outline first of all, I wanted to speak about the outstanding resilience of Ukrainian economy, because if you remember, then last year, I think the average forecast on the downfall of the economy was on the level of 33-35% for most of the forecasts after the full-scale war has started. A lot of the financial organizations, they forecasted the level of the downfall of 40%, even 45%. So the results that we have now and the results that we have right now, the downfall of 30%, yes, on one hand, that's a very harsh figures, even if we will compare it with the deepest crisis of Ukrainian history, and even if we compare it with the history of the other countries during the war. But on the other hand, it's a way better result compared to what we could have forecasted from the very beginning of the full-scale invasion in March or April. The main reason for that, for this improvement and for this restoration of Ukrainian economy, especially during the quarters 2 and 3, I would say that there was a very high level of adaptability of Ukrainian businesses and Ukrainian population. I would also say that there were also successful actions from the government as well to stabilize the situation. And of course, in my point of view, I also wanted to outline the macro-financial stability and the working for banking system. And I do believe that all of those factors, they were really important and then have given us the opportunity to more or less stand against those challenges that our economy has faced. But as we all know, the situation in quarter 4 has been significantly worsened because of the attacks on the civil infrastructure. And that is why we have a different forecast in January, speaking especially about the restoration of the GDP level. If in October, before those attacks to the civilian infrastructure has started, we thought that the economy might grow and restore up to 4%. So in January, we got to 1.3. So basically, we have left the GDP almost without any changes compared to all of the figures of the GDP that we had for the last 2 years. In the same time, when we have seen how the situation has developed since the time of our January forecast, in my point of view, so right now we have risks that the situation in the quarter 1 is going to be much better. It might be connected to the idea that our energy sector has shown a tremendous resilience, and it's partly because of the very good work of Ukrainian army and with the courage of our experts in the energy sector who have conducted the maintenance, who have started the new lines of the producing of the electricity, who have conducted different ways of how it can be restored. And of course, we're really lucky with the weather. Due to the quite warm winter, we didn't have this really high need in electricity, and the overall the level of usage of the electricity was much lower than we have expected when the winter season has started. Due to all of these factors, for sure, we're going to have a better results in quarter 1 and quarter 2 of this year. And even though even though that in December and January we have certain decline of the economical forecasts and certain decline of the atm economical atmosphere. So we have believed that it was just quite short terms. It was mostly connected to the seasonal effects. And so basically in February, we have already seen certain restorations of the indicators that have slightly downfallen in the beginning of the winter. Plus, for me, the very important factor for the restoration of the economy this year should be the international support. As it had already been said by the minister, we have all of the chances to provide the additional funding for the budget deficiency and about the deficit with the help of our international partners, and we can also once again restore the domestic debt markets, and will also give us the opportunity that will help us to decrease the opportunities of risks to get back to the monetary ways of supporting economy, and we will have a better stabilized situation in the monetary sector as well, which creates the ground for us to mitigate our currency limitations and to once again review the measures that we have conducted for the monetary tools that will once again give additional boost for the economy. In the same times, we have a lot of risks in the military sector. There is a lot of risks on the front line, and there is a lot of risk connected to the grain corridor. And in our macroeconomical forecast, we, on one hand, it doesn't whether we're using this conservative assumption here that we have a really high security risks that will definitely take place till the end of this year. That's quite a balanced approach, but still we believe that the grain corridor should function even after the terms of these conditions will run out on the 18th of March. But in the same time, we're trying to be very careful with that. We're trying to be very careful towards this assumption, and we do not foresee any kind of enrollment of this enlargement of this corridor and inclusion to this corridor some other goods that might be included into that. I think that I will stop with that. The one thing that I wanted to reflect as well on what I have heard already. So one thing that I have noticed in the forecast that Maria have shown us, that there is a really high level of uncertainty on the real indicators of economy from -4 to a +5%, what we have seen in development of the GDP for this year. But if we will take a look at certain monetary indicators, for example, the currency rates or the amount of our domestic reserves, so you can see that the differences in the forecast is way narrower. So for me, that's also a certain positive signal as well, that even despite even though our main experts there evaluate the longitude of the military actions in the different way, and they also evaluate the impact in a different way, they still believe that the monetary and the financial support of the country will be able to provide the macro-financial stability, that we will be able to avoid the destabilization in the international market, that we will still have the support of the international partners, and we will be able to carry the certain level for the international aid, and so we will provide an anchor for the subjects of our indexes of our economy. So let us hope that this stability that will give us the opportunity to provide the functioning of economy through the martial law, and we hope that it will provide a main ground and the main deep ground for the post-war recovery. Serhiy, let me have a question to you straight away, just to continue your previous statements. So we do have some of the issues that are really hard to be forecasted. For example, speaking about the military action, that's definitely really hard to forecast any kind of war, because the war is really hard forecastable event. But there are some things that can be forecasted by the national policy. Have the National Bank considered the response of the market towards the tools that have been introduced by the National Bank, starting from the limitations of the deposit currency procurement or introducing a harsher tools for the monetary policies, for example, like talking about the additional bookings policies, or whether what we have seen in the currency issues, like because we're starting to talk about the big strategic questions, but people are asking why the dollar is down falling right now in the rates levels. So whether these changes can also whether there can be some certain impact on that the dollar can not only grow during the war, but it can also downfall the rates in the rates. That's an interesting question that has multiple aspects to that. And if we will speak about our policies from the very start of the full-scale war, then we have provided the sustainable approach to the currency rate that has been supported by our assumptions and the control of the capital. We have been in this situation during summer when the continuation of the fixed currency rate was really unsustainable, and we have understood that for quite of a different reasons, and that is why we have decided that we will correct the currency rate up to 25%. After that, we have in mid-year, we have conducted certain measures that were targeted on one hand to provide the attractiveness of the incomes and equities in hryvnia, in national currency, and on the other hand, they were also targeted to added these differences between what we have in the cash segments of the currency market and what we have in the trans-banking markets. So all of that together, first of all, the increase of the main rates and the events on supporting the overall usage of the currencies, increasing the income rates of the other two financial tools in hryvnia. I'm talking about our internal debt obligations in hryvnia. That's all have created a certain pressure to the currency rate in the official segment, and we have seen that the pressure gone lower. And that is why we have provided the banking system with this opportunity to increase this overflow between the official segments and between the systems in between the banks and the cash markets. And we've also introduced certain deposit products together with the commercial banks, and that has really given us the opportunity to decrease the demand in the cash segment. So basically, the amount of those measurements, together with improving the assistance by our international partners and by introducing additional cash into the country with the help of the foreign corridor, have given us the opportunity to stimulate the increase of our reserves with the support of the international aid as well, and to narrow this gap, this difference between these official currency rate and the rate between the banks. So this is what we're trying to go through. So if we have the official fixed rate, we can see that there is a little bit of a difference with the cash rates, and we're trying not to get it way too far from the official course with the official rate, using different official tools. Yes, thank you, Serhiy. Well, having predictability in something that is already very good during the war. So we have Oleksiy Sobolev, who is a Deputy Minister of Economy, who was responsible for the economical forecasts and forecasting. So Oleksiy, I wanted to ask you, what is the vision for the ministry right now? So you are the source of the main governmental forecast that is going to be also the basis for the state budget as well. We have already seen what Maria has already introduced, what is the consensus forecast from the non-governmental experts. So you can see from -5 to +5 for the GDP, and the National Bank is also forecasting growth growth of closer to zero, but that he has now said that there is more positive risks to this forecast, that maybe this forecast will be re-evaluated for the better positive numbers for the GDP growth. So what does the Ministry of Economy know? But thank you very much. Thank you very much for your invitation. Yes, the ministry has already prepared the forecast as well, and we have the forecast that has been used for making the budget, and we can also consider what has changed throughout this forecast that we used for the budget building as well. I think that I would like to speak about a couple of moments. I think that you have mentioned them already, possibly, but the first thing that we have a clearer understanding now, that's when the full-scale war has started, that we've expected to have a way worse results for the GDP of year 2022. So yes, we have seen that the GDP has now decreased by 30%, plus minus more, and we had even greater expectations. So the Ukraine was quite resilient in this case. We also can say that the economy has shown a really high level of adaptivity, and we could see the research for the Advanta Group, and the Advanta Group has regular research, and we can compare those couple of months, the first 4 months of the full-scale war, how many businesses did not work at all. So you can see there was almost a half of all of the businesses that didn't work, and up till now that we have up till 20% of businesses that do not work. So the economy was okay, and it actually also gives us a clearer understanding that we have some additional reasons for the possibility of work. What we also can say that it seems like we have passed the peak of inflation last year. So we had the peak on 26% level, and now we see that is slowly decreasing. That is a very good thing as well. So the policy of the National Bank has supported that, and what we are forecasting that from 26 for the level of 26%, that the inflation is going to decrease up to a level of 24%. But the main difference between the forecast of today and the forecast that we have used while we were preparing the budget for year 2023 is that, first of all, the military actions. For the budget, we have forecasted that they will end till the mid-year. But right now, our main assumption is that the war will go throughout year 2023, and this assumption has the biggest impact for the GDP forecast. So right now we don't have the 3% of growth. So right now what we see is that we are forecasting around 1% of growth. And on the other hand, what has improved compared to the forecast that we have used for the budget is the level of the international aid. So we have seen that there was additional $10 billion, and this also actually shows that we are more reassured now that the international assistance will be provided to us than, for example, we were half a year ago. And speaking about some positive assumptions and positive things as well, it seems like Russia has lost the fight for Ukrainian energy sector. So basically, we have all expected the biggest blackouts. We didn't have the full blackout. Of course, we have certain troubles and certain challenges, and we need to be prepared for the next autumn season straight away now. But in the forecast that we have now, we have not assumed, we don't have any assumptions of the bigger blackouts for the country, and it also has given us the assumptions that we can forecast the certain growth of the GDP as well. All of the other things were just basically the same as it was in the previous forecast as well. So what can we see? There might be forecasted the growth of GDP by 1%. That's something that we might expect. Yes, okay, thank you, Oleksiy. I just want to have this technical moment. So we have a technical moment that we need to discuss. So when we're speaking about a forecast of growth of 1% or closer to zero, that actually means that That means that actually that is the forecast. That is the forecast compared to the months when we had the active military actions in Ukraine. That is actually, we're talking about the real growth. Because last year we only had two peaceful months, January and February, when the economy was functioning more or less in a normal regime. So yes, we've had some tense situations, but with the ports were working, the rockets were not flying over Ukraine. So even the 0 point something increase this year, it would mean that we have an increase in our monthly activities. Thank you very much, Oleksiy. So we can see that in the forecast of the Ministry of Economy, we in the assumptions, then we have some negative changes coming. That will be the negative assumptions that the war is prolonged, that there is a possibility that the military action will take longer. There is a better don't change for better for what Serhiy has said, that there is a faster response to Ukrainian energy system to provide all of the needs and all of the demands of the Ukrainian customers. So right now we'll have the opportunity to discuss the questions that you have. But today we'll also have the authors, the experts that have provided their thoughts to all of the evaluations, and the ones that have been the parts of our think tank group. We have the representatives of both non-profitable and commercial companies. And I would like to pass the floor to Maria, who's going to be who's going to be guiding the next discussion together with the colleagues. You have been a part of this think tank and those forecasters. So we're going to be continuing discussing both the forecasts, and we have had those forecasts and assumptions for the last months, and it's quite okay that during the martial law we have the changes on a monthly basis, and we'll be able to discuss what kind of factors have impacted our forecasts and whether we will be able to expect some growth this year. So, Maria, the floor is yours, and the moderation is up to you. Yes, thank you very much. Thank you very much. I wanted to thank once again to all of our colleagues for your impact, because basically you're doing very important work during the war, and that's really important for all of us. The one thing that I wanted to outline was the one thing that he has already said as well. The difference between the GDP forecast is quite huge. So if, for example, when we're saying that some of us at 5.5 and everyone expecting the downfall, no. So we have one person who's expecting the downfall of 4.6%, one person who expects the downfall of 3%, and we have one person who expects the growth up to 5.5. We have two people who are expecting the growth on the level of 2%. And I just wanted to ask our optimists to comment on this forecast. So 5.5% of increase. I think that's very cool, and everybody else believe that maybe that's way too optimistic. Oleksiy, maybe you would like to comment upon that. Yes, so please welcome Oleksiy Blinov from the Saints Bank. Yes, hi everyone. You know, I'm unexpected to be the optimistic one. I didn't expect myself to be the optimist. You know, there is so you know that we have the main optimist and the main pessimist, but the main economist always rules. But why do I have thought about 5.5? And based on this assumption that my colleagues have drawn in this discussion, so the main important moment for all of us is the issue of harvest. There has been a lot of thoughts of what's going to happen for this winter, that we're not going to have a lot of winter harvests coming up this spring. And we understand that we have problems with the occupied territories. And we know that there is a very bad expectations of the results of what we can plant on those territories that should be demined. But based on what Ukraine has harvested last year, and you know, for example, the yield of the corn has provided for what has been prolonged last year. So do we believe that Ukraine will be harvesting and yielding for a longer period, and we will be able to work with this new yield. We hope that the yield might increase, so that is the most important moment that can explain this gap. The issue of energy sector, we've also discussed it, and if we will take a look of the history of forecasting from the Sense Bank, so basically we haven't changed our forecast of the growth for this year, starting from autumn last year. So we've had from 6% to 5.5%. So we were been using most of our operational indicators, and due to a lot of measurements, so we have been worried quite a lot, but we have seen that the blackouts effect for the economy was really moderate. And of course, the peak of it, as of now, and it's obvious that the peak of it has stayed in 2022. The hardest was the last week of November, when all of the country was blackouted, and when we have lost around 50, almost all of the time of the productive time, and basically none of the people were able to work in November. So it was the first part of December was harsh as well, and after that we have seen the improvement that was quite obvious in February right now. So we have seen that there is we do believe that this, well, our forecast was not that much scared by the blackouts, but I just wanted to underline those differences, because when I take a look at the forecast of our colleagues, then I can see some other important things as well. First of all, we have a smaller base. Just for us to understand that difference between -5 and +5%, this is the one beneath that we're going to have from 67 up to 73% of growth for the GDP in real numbers. So you can take a look at this percent on the calculator. So that the growth would be not the 10 percentile points, but +6 if we're speaking about the comparison to the pre-war economy. So what is very important as well from what the Minister of Finance said, so we need to have the real economy, speaking about the taxes. So we can see that everyone, the governmental and non-governmental institutions, the nominal forecasts, what we have seen in this slide, that was up to 6 trillion hryvnias in currency, even though there has been some certain forecast on these differences in the currency rate, that will be just the same, that will be around $150 billion. So I do believe that the organic part of economy that creates taxes, whether it's going to happen due to inflation or whether it happens due to the natural growth, the balance will be kept. And there might be some different conditions going to that, and do not say that we're going to have the increase of the incomes up to 200 billions due to the increase of the nominal cost. We have some clear understanding that, for example, the VA, the income tax cannot be that high as it is. But if we're speaking about the consumption itself, and on this part of the economy that creates more or less proportional tax of fiscal income, then we can do some good forecast there. Yes, thank you very much. And Oleksiy, I will just add up to how we're going to conduct our conversation further on. You can raise your hand if you would like to add up something to the story or to reflect on the stories that have been said as well. But one thing that I wanted to cover as well, and we have the Q&A questions. We have 7 questions in the Q&A section. So by the way, if you will have questions, use the Q&A function on the lower panel of your Zoom. We will answer those. But I would like to ask to comment on the negative. So I would like to pass the floor to Evghenia Sleptsova and then Olena Bilan. Evghenia would like to comment? Yes. Evghenia Sleptsova from Oxford Economics. Yes. I'm sorry straight away if there might be some mistakes in my Ukrainian, because most of my life I have spent in Moldova or in the UK. But what were the assumptions for this forecast? Well, first of all, unfortunately, this is an assumption that the war is going to continue throughout the whole year 2023. And what was the negative assumptions that we used as well? Then there's also the metallurgy that has fallen by 80%. And so the assumption that we've used was also that the export corridor, the one that we've had for the Black Sea grain corridor, will not going to be now not going to be exposed to metals as well. That's one of the negative assumptions that impacts our forecast. And we're still working to, those are about our corrected data that looks that are quite different from the non-corrected data, and it also impacts our forecasts. So we forecast quite a dynamic restoration, recovery from quarter to quarter up to 7 and 9 to up to 9%. But this basis that we've had from January or February 2022, that doesn't give us an opportunity to cover the big negative assumptions and the big losses that we have for the year 2022. So that will be the things that we believe will impact. So even if we're going to see the quarterly recovery, so we have with the season-based data, we need to have more than 10% for every quarter, and I do not see that happening when the war continues and when the assistance is not quite fast. So both the military support and the financial support, and I do not see the grounds so that we will have a very dynamic recovery this year. Okay, thank you, Evghenia, Olena, Bilan, and I will switch to Q&A, and then we will get to our panelists. Good afternoon. Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. I wanted to make a brief remark as well to take a step aside from our forecast because Mr. Marchenko, he has what would be the assumptions and the arguments for the recovery and the policies that will be able to grow the economy and restore the economy. I want all of us to confess and to understand that we have little idea of what is going on in the economy. So, maybe possibly the Ministry of Economy knows a little bit more than we know, and the Ministry of the Finance might know a little bit. But the data that we have that have been published right now, we have 9 months of the previous years. We have some separate sectors that cover only 30% of the economy. So, this big difference of the forecast is based on the idea that, unfortunately, the first policy measure that helped us to switch for this discussion of what you have assumed and why you have -5 and the others have +5 would be the data that we need to be published, at least for those sectors that are not the part of the military secret, of the confidential information. So I think that they will be able to have a better forecast, and we will be able to switch from this discussion to the others important questions of how we can recover the economy during the war. And I do believe so, if we will try to take this, as I say, the helicopter view analysis, then if, for example, we will be able to engage additional money for the fast recovery, and this might also be a factor that will give us a better influx for the economy, that will be the good indicator, and it will help us to grow. Even though we have the really big figures that we should be compared to, we can have a good growth on the level of a couple percent. Another moment of what we have seen from the side of the international investors, everyone states their interest. But of course, when we understand that there are a high level of the military risks, then the investment are going to get here only if the situation is going to get safer. And it is important for us, that's the important factor for us is, once again, the insurance for the military risks. I know that we have a pilot project on those issues already, but if you will have the opportunity to maybe facilitate and scale up this pilot, then that would be a very important signal for both international and domestic investments. And we know that the businesses, we do not know for sure, again, because we don't have the statistics available, but from what we have heard already, then there are just a few businesses that are brave enough to continue invest under the circumstances. Yes, thank you, Olena, for this reflection. Thank you very much. And I'm just going to step aside from the moderator role. Yes, Maria, I'm sorry, I just forgotten to one moment that I wanted to say. There was a question about about the defense complex as well. And this is about the third quarter as well. And the newest data that we have is the third quarter last year. So just for all of us to understand the context, then the most of the organization, the Ministry of Economy, the National Bank, we have been evaluating the data based on the results of the third quarter, when the third quarter has already been out, and the downfall of the GDP was minus 35. The State Statistics Agency, they have published a way better figure, minus 31. We do not know what happened there in the quarterly four, but I do believe that our military and defense complex, the military and defense sector, I don't know whether we should wait for the positive surprises with that. Unfortunately, we will not be able to evaluate that, and I don't know if it's possible, but this is one of the factors that will support the economy as well. Yes, thank you, Olena. I think you can take your hand down and you will raise your hand. And then I will just have a comment upon the insurance as well of the military risks. A couple of weeks ago, there was at the mega event, so this is a branch of the World Bank who are responsible for the international insurance of the international risks. So right now they're collecting the trust funds from the donoring countries that will help them to increase the capital, so they will be providing the insurance coverage, the coverage for the military risks for the non-resident investors. Those are now for direct foreign investment and for the non-residents. For Ukrainians, unfortunately, they will not take them. But we will have to create the Ukrainian tools for Ukrainian investors as well. And it would be very good if the donors would support this MIGAS initiative, because it definitely is going to help the private sector to engage more money. I see them hands raised by Oleksandra and Vitalii, but I wanted to get to this Q&A step and then back to the comments from our experts. So do we have Serhiy Marchenko with us? Serhiy, if you're still with us, can you take this question? No, because there is a question from James Rogers, whether the minister can tell us more about the role of the Western companies in Ukraine's recovery and which Ukrainian business sectors are most in the need of support from the Western companies. Are there any Western companies that you would like to highlight for their part that they're playing in Ukraine's recovery? Well, you know, that's I don't think that it's a good question that I should take, because it's more of a philosophical question, whether we're interested in engaging more in foreign investments. Yes, of course. What should we do for that, just to get them right now? So we have started to discuss it right now. So we need to have this MEGA insurance and the other issues of the insuring of the military risks. What should we do for them to be engaged after the war? That's an interesting issue as well. We're speaking about the investment attractiveness. We're speaking about the certain regulations. We're speaking about the facilitating of the fiscal climate. So that's a broad topic, and I don't think that we can waste time right now for this question, because that's not a focus of this webinar that you have been conducting. So we can have a separate conversation of that. Okay, thank you very much. So I think then I'll pass the floor to Oleksandra and then Vitalii. Yes, hello, ladies and gentlemen. First of all, I just wanted to support what Olena has said, that we do not have a clear understanding of how the economy develops right now, and what Oleksiy has said as well, that January and February, then we see some kind of development, and we have no idea. So when the state, when for example, how the state agency of statistics is going to calculate this yield of corn right now that is being collected, being gathered right now, and this also going to be impacting the indicators of the agriculture as well. If we're speaking about the state statistics indicators that they have given for the Q3 of last year, they have also included the indicators of the temporarily occupied territories, the one that we have not assumed, for example, in our forecast. So there's also a question: what do we assume and what do we compare to? So we need more information for the state statistics office, for them just to tell us what they use, what figures of they use, what they're comparing to, how do they get these numbers that they publish. Speaking about what is going to impact the development and why do we have these differences in the forecasts, I think that's what you have noticed already before. So this is about the logistics and it's about the grain corridor. I just wanted to highlight that it's important for us to think that the logistics is very important for the development of economy of Ukraine right now. The survey that we have conducted on a monthly basis, it has shown that the logistics is one of the main important reasons for the development of businesses and the exports. The metallurgy, for example, has lost the opportunity to export their goods through the seaports, and this is a very big problem and challenge for the metallurgy sector. And the enterprises have already shown that they can grow their production if they will be able to export their products. We have to consider that as well. We will have to consider that when we're going to have the further on discussions for the international support for Ukraine. Because, for example, we understand that the increase of the production in Ukraine, the increase of the exports from Ukraine, and the increase of the taxes, in this case, that will also decrease the need for the international support, the one that we can call the emergency financing. This is something that we have to have a clear understanding about. When we're talking about the logistic support, so what has already been said, the broadening role of the seaports, even if we will broaden the corridor for grains, for example, that will decrease the usage of the railroad for the grain transportation. Right now, the railroad takes most of the grains, and that is why we're using grains. Because we use the railroad for the grains, we cannot use it for the ore, we cannot use it for the metal. If we will fully book the ports for the grains, we will give the opportunity for the metallurgic sector to provide and sell, they export their product as well. We had this information that our producers of the spirits, they cannot work full scale because they have some problems with exports of the products because of the logistics problem. Our government has done a lot last year to improve the logistics, with using the automobile transportation, so using the railroad logistics. But we need to collaborate with our international partners further on so that we will be able to improve the logistics better, because the problem is not only in the bottlenecks in Ukraine, but also the bottlenecks in Poland and Romania, especially speaking on the railroad. So the logistics right now is of the biggest importance for the recovery of Ukraine. And one moment that I also wanted to add to this moment, so in our institute forecast, we have forecasted 1.7% of growth of the GDP because of the growth of the market. We're going to have the growth of possible the grain corridor or the metal corridor. But these figures, they do not include the active recovery. So this is basically speaking about the very emergency recovery that we've had, but we have not included here the recovery that the president of Ukraine has spoken about, this $18 billion this year. If there will be money for the recovery, then we will see the faster development of the economy of Ukraine. But right now, these financial needs that we have spoken about, that we have seen on the slides, those are not the needs for the broad-scaled recovery. Those are the needs, as we just say, just for Ukraine to keep on existing, that we need this money. So this is the things that have to be considered. For the full-scale recovery, we need more financial capacities. Thank you. Yes, thank you. Thank you, Oleksandra. Vitalii, please. I also wanted to have a comment, and I will get back to our Q&A. Yes, thank you. So, I think I'm going to... Yes, sorry, I just wanted to introduce Vitalii Vavryshchuk from the ICU. Yes, I think that I'm going to voice out the same statement for the third time, and I think it will be very important because we need to have a shorter cycle of these statistics being collected and being published. From what I understand, that there is a problem that, first of all, is being limited by the legislation that has been active since the beginning of the full-scale war, that there is some certain changes from the obligations to provide a different level of reporting and statistics reporting as well, and understanding that we have the representatives of our main stakeholders here. So maybe I would like to ask them and to recommend them to discuss this issue as well, and maybe to offer certain changes to the legislation, so we will have an opportunity for a faster collection and procession of the statistics information. Because, I do not know other significant defense or security risks that should postpone the publishing of the statistics data for 6 months. That would be the first comment. And I also were really interested in seeing the results of the consensus forecast, and I was also surprised by the tightness of the forecasts. I think we had quite a tight forecast, and I do believe that it means that we all agree that there's some kind of event will not happen that will have a destructive impact for the economy. Well, we think about the military risks all the time, so we're always considering that they're always with us here. But speaking about the factors of the economy, I think that our policymakers, the ministries and the National Bank, they have conducted a very high quality management of the macroeconomical risks. And the forecast that you have seen today as well, I think that this is a very good proof to that as well. And very, very briefly, I wanted to draw your attention to the possible positive surprises for the year 2023. So we have already spoken about the GDP, we have spoken about the nominal and the real GDP, and I just wanted to draw your attention to the forecast of the exchange rate. And according to this forecast, we do not expect the fast devaluation of the currency till the end of the year. And I do believe that this is a very interesting aspect, that this is something that might be very interesting to a lot of people who are listening to us today, because that's a very positive message that states that right now the National Bank has full control on the bank's market, and they are preserving control for the exchange rate as well. And the chances are really high that they will be able to keep the hryvnia's rate on the very good level throughout the year. I'm not going to make a guess whether it's going to be a lower rate or the same with the rate of the same level as it is now. But the most important thing here is that any kind of changes is going to be the decision of the National Bank of Ukraine. That will not be a response to a force majeure event. So there will be something that has been planned and calculated in advance by the National Bank if this kind of a solution, if this kind of a change is going to happen. So there should not be any kind of, now we don't expect any negative surprises, or we do not expect any big changes as we used to see that in the year 2022, as National Banks has said it before, when they were forced to make this step and to fix the rate, the currency rate. I do believe that we're not going to have any kind of these big events for year 2023. Yes, thank you very much. Thank you very much. You're sure that the currency rate forecast were quite close, were quite tight, and there is slightly differences in indicators till the end of the year, but they were not that significant as the devaluation that we has already seen. I just wanted to get to the Q&A section and to answer one of the questions again, and I would like to ask ask Serhiy Nikolaychuk and Oleksiy Sobolev to respond to that question, and I cannot find this question right now in the chat, but the question was about the updated forecast of the National Bank. So did it change compared to what it used to be, and whether the differences between the forecasts between the National Bank in the inflation level. So can you tell us a little bit more about that? So Serhiy and Oleksiy, can you tell us more whether you hope to see in year 2023? Thank you for the question, and I think that the main forecast for the inflation is this sector. This is the moment when we have very big differences with our forecast with the government. As Oleksiy has already said, right now the evaluation of the inflation by the end of the year for the Ministry of Economy is 24%, even though the budget has been built with the assumption of with the even higher assumption of 28%. So with the NBU, based on our January forecast, as for the end of the year, we expect to have inflation 18.5%. So actually lower even than the 20% level. You know, our forecast is mostly based on the idea that we will be able to provide the sustainability and the resilience of the currency market. We will be able to avoid the dramatic changes of the foreign exchange rates, and we will continue the de-inflation course that we've had at the beginning of this year. Plus, compared to the previous year, we do hope that we will have less problems with logistics, that we will have less problems with providing the goods from the southern region and to the southern region, that we will be able to resolve those problems. Mostly that's one of the factors that caused the biggest inflation previous years. And what we have also seen, that there has been a change of the main trend for a lot of countries, so that would be a trend for the world economy as well. That will be also there's also going to be the transmission of this international trend to our inflation as well. There is a trend on the decrease of the inflation, and there are some other tools that we're going to be providing this year as well. That's something that gives us the basis to decide that the process of the inflation is going to be controlled. If the last year there were some risks on the growth of the inflation due to the military actions, and that was important for us not to lose this process from our control. So right now we can see that right now we're already leading a opposite process. We're now decreasing the inflation levels as it goes. So inflation was one of the elements of how the economy tried to adapt to the new reality, of the Marshall time. But right now we need to make sure that this price correction is not going to be turned into this swirl of the prices increase and a constant increase between the currency rates and the differences for the salaries. So we do understand that this vicious circle has to be broken, and we have to provide the sustainable decrease of inflation. That's all from me. Thank you. Yes, thank you, Oleksiy. What would be your forecast for the inflation, and why is the difference between your forecast and the forecast of the National Bank? Yes, I think we might be more conservative than the National Bank, and overall our forecast, I think, is more of well, compared to what I have heard as well, I think it's more conservative from what I hear, from what I've heard before, but I wanted to agree with everyone that it's very unusual for the macro forecast, because there's a lot of things that we do not know. There's a lot of things that we do not know. There's a lot of things that we cannot compare. And you've mentioned about our new spring campaign in the agriculture. How do we work with that? What kind of territories will be considered, what will not? Then again, the issues of the immigration and unemployment. The demined territories, and we have millions of hectares that have been demined that will be not used this year. So what would be the balance of the payments overall and the balance of the invoices? That's all will impact as differences in these indicators and the differences in the inflation indicators as well. So what was our grounds that we have used? We know that has been a lot of losses for the companies. So our main hypothesis is that they're going to be that most of the losses are going to be covered by the customers. Let us not forget that the inflation is that because of on this level, because the government has frozen a lot of indicators. So we do not have this macro forecast that it will change, but we have to understand why we have 26%, but not more. So I do think that we are considering this in this regime. So we have gone through winter, we have gone through winter without the big blackouts. We do not know when the next attack on the civil infrastructure will be, maybe again during autumn, and it's better for us to be on this conservative side in those evaluations. Yes, thank you very much. I have another question for you, so please stay with us right now because I don't see any raised hands for the comments right now, but I think there will be another question for you on the unemployment. The unemployment has grown, it's still very big, and are there any policies on the micro level that the Ministry of Economy is going to use in order to stimulate employment, in order to stimulate the restoration of the small and medium businesses, just to improve the forecast of the GDP? Well, yes, it's a huge problem. We're dealing with this as well. There is something that is atypical for this year as well. So every 100,000 people who's going to come back is a 0.5% of the GDP. So we do understand that the government's policies is that for us to get all of the people back. I think that this is going to be the most profitable resource usage and the time usage as well. But in the same time, these people, they need to work in somewhere. We need the programs, we need the work for the small and the medium businesses. We do have a granting programs, we do have the grantings for the processing businesses as well. And we are providing the grant through banks. People apply on this bank through DIA. And well, the program has already been provided, and the budget has a little bit less than 1 billion hryvnias for that, and there is a demand for a couple of billion hryvnias for that, and we can keep on talking to our donors who might have helped us with those financial support resource. Yes, we are stimulating the main jobs, and this is the main important conditions for the grants. So we have more than 1,000 applications provided. So government works with that, but this is a very atypical policy for the government. Another policy that we have been working with is we're also talking about the humanitarian demining. We want to have not the millions of hectares that have been mined, but at least 100,000. So, because it's definitely going to be responsible for another couple of percent of GDP. We know that we will not be able to demine most of the territories this year, but there will be more opportunities for the agricultural sector to sow something new and to have additional money for the economy. Okay, thank you very much. There is another question for Serhiy Marchenko from Interfox Ukraine. If the forecast have changed and now the GDP growth is forecasted on the lower level than it was before, and the inflation is forecasted on the lower level as well, will the government review the state budget? So Serhiy, if you're still with us and if you can take this question, please, if you are still with us. Yes, I'm here and I can take this question. Yes, of course. Yes, of course, it's a question of time. It's a question of time and the question of that there is something that we need to do. So yeah, we'll have these amendments to the budget. So you will also review the incomes of the budget, right? I don't think that we will going to be reviewing the income, the profits of the budgets. Yes, the costs, yes. The costs, yes, due to the main reasons, due to the main due to the main directions. On the incomes, unfortunately, we were very limited to that. So we should not expect the review of the macro forecast for the. So we will not have a great impact on the profits. Well, no, there will not be a significant review if we will do that. I'll be honest with you, saying that right now we are mostly looking on the figures of the previous year than for the macro forecast. We are comparing our incomes for the specific sectors, and we're trying to figure out the main reasons for the increase or decrease of the income. So there are many temporary reasons for that. So for example, like the Ukrbudova hasn't paid the rent for the last month, but will pay for the next month. That's something that impacted the indicators on the rent. So there are many different indicators, and the main income sources of the budget are now the income on the private person's income and the VAT. So that's more or less sustainable. In this case, there's no big movement or changes that we expect in this part. So unfortunately, we are going to be building our profitability based on that. Yes, thank you. And do you have any expectations? Well, I do hope I hope that someone will ask this question, but no one has asked this question, so I will ask this question now. In the forecast of our experts, I have seen that there is a difference between what is forecasted of how much money we need and how much money we expect to have from the international partners. And the difference is quite significant. Even on the average level, we're speaking about the difference in about 10 billion euro, or it might be even bigger. So does the Ministry of Finance have a clearer understanding of how should we finance that if we will not have more financial support from the international community? Yes, I would say that we have this 10 billion gap, and I would stick to this figure before we have a clear commitment from our partners. How can we cover this gap? We have some understanding of that, but it's once again not a clear understanding. As soon as we will have the strict commitment from our partners, we will see that this number, we will have a better figures. But right now, we will stick to the 10 billion figure. When the program will be available, if we will have the implementation of the commitment that we have now discussed, so this figure can be easily closed. Because let us think about the situation that we had last year. The situation was much more complicated and way more unforeseeable. So the deficiency has been bigger. Right now, the situation is more or less sustainable. We can forecast. We have the good balanced incoming of the money from our partners, and so I do not think that there will be risks that we will not have enough income. And speaking about the domestic market, and I think that will be the question to Serhiy as well, whether the National Bank is going to print additional hryvnia this year. For the question to both Serhiy, well, I think we'll have the same answer then, because we will do whatever in our power not to do that. And everything that is possible and impossible not to do that. Thank you for your answers and for your actions. Thank you very much. So, okay, dear colleagues, if someone would like to give some additional comments from our panelists, yes, Oleksandra, please. Yes, I will try to be very brief, because yes, our funding needs is 10 billion higher than what we expect to have. 37 billions, we have already said that we have it, but the funding needs are much higher, so it's much higher from what Serhiy has even said. I just wanted to outline that what we actually need, we need the support from different partners in different ways and different shapes. And I want to emphasize that most of our forecast last year, we have built it and we have waited for our multinational partners as well, that they will help us with the money from the reserve currency. And none of us has given us that yet. And I know that I've heard it from different people and the experts from other countries, and there's a lot of ideas why it can be done. And I think that Canada has started to do that, to go with this first to the first steps of providing that for this reserve in the reserves currently of IMF. So it's not just like the issuing of additional money that have to be taken from the taxpayers or whatever, and then has to be returned. So Maria, we have discussed it, and with a couple of other organizations, we have provided the address to the countries of the G7 and to the G20 for them to consider this possible amendments to this legislation so that we will be able to have the access to these reserve currencies. So that will be a very important moment that will help us to cover the big amount of financial support that we need this year. I just wanted to say that the National Bank and the Ministry of Finance have done a lot of work in the domestic market. We have seen that in this first 2 months of this year, we've had already our domestic military bonds that has been already on the level of this year, and we have even started this benchmarking of the domestic bonds, and the Ministry of the Finance even increased the rates of the bonds. So in the internal market, the domestic market, we will also have it covered. So maybe that debt that we have now, that will be covered by the domestic market as well. But again, without the additional external assistance, we will not be able to go on. We will need money for the recovery. And once again, of what has been said before, right now, when we're talking right now about this emergency finance, we're talking about the official support. But when we're talking about the recovery, we're also speaking about the private capital. We're also speaking about the private companies that are going to come to Ukraine and that will recover Ukraine. So our production line, our industries, that will all be needed, and we need to have our industries restored, and we need to have the insurance for the military risks. Thank you. Thank you, Oleksandra. If you have anything that you would like to say to your colleagues, please raise your hands. Serhiy, please. Yes, I wanted to thank you for having this and organize this conversation. There are important questions, and we wanted to also note down this question for this access to the statistical data. You know, half a year we have raised these questions in the government meeting. Unfortunately, this question hasn't been heard. And maybe Oleksiy Sobolev will help give us a hand, and maybe the main responsible ministry for that, and the ministry who is responsible for the statistics, so that we can get to the normal statistic data publishing, because right now that is a problem, that is a real problem. But overall, I'm really grateful that the discussion happened. Thank you very much for the discussion. It was very productive. Yes, thank you very much. Thank you very much for that. Thank you very much for raising the questions for the statistics. We all hope that we will be able to have this access. Thank you very much for the very good reports and forecasting. That was very interesting for me to read out through your reports and your forecast. I hope that everyone were able to take a look at the website for the Lalaka Foundation. If you weren't able to do that, then please, you can see that once again. Those are the QR codes that you can use for a donation. If you are interested in supporting Ukrainian military people, you can scan those codes, and you can go to the website lelaka.care, and you will see that you will be able to make your donation to the Lalaka Foundation. Thank you very much for this event. We hope to see you soon. Have a nice evening. Goodbye.